Hey everyone, I'm Cody Spengler, the account executive for Austin and San Antonio here at Weaver Technologies. I'm here with my enterprise solutions architect, Javier. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. This is Javier Prado. I'm the Enterprise Solutions Architect here. We've worked with Cody Spangler.
Little in background on me, I was at Dell for about 8 years, been at Weaver for about 2.5 years at this point, helping customers make decisions around their technology. We are a value-added reseller, tech partner of Dell, along with quite a few other vendors. We help out with all things from integrations to deployments to configurations, scoping, everything along those lines. We're here to help our customers make decisions on the next step. A lot of what our customers are talking about these days are ultimately hypervisors. We're well aware of the scenario that we're in with purchasing VMware. A lot of our customers heavily embedded in VMware. The intent of today is to give a little bit more information around kind of what other opportunities are out there, some updates on Broadcom and the VMware packages that are available, as well as talk about a couple other options that a lot of our customers are looking into. So we're going to go ahead and run through a few slides here to give you guys a high-level overview of what's going on in the marketplace. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about the new way of the world, right? We know that previously, back years and years ago, this whole idea of a 3-2-1 architecture was the bread and butter. That's ultimately your server infrastructure, your switching, and your storage. This was kind of the traditional way of doing technology and what most of our customers have been doing up until now, maybe 10 years or so ago. Why? Why 3-tier? It was a traditional model everyone knew at the time. It was very agnostic to what you were trying to do with the environment, as well as allowing you to pick the technology that you're putting in place. The pros here, again, are going to be the flexibility and the independent scaling capability. So no matter if you need additional compute, you need additional storage, you need additional networking, you could do those independently of each other. You don't necessarily have to buy a compute with the storage when you need capacity owned. The secondary piece here is that you can have a multi-vendor ecosystem, which means if you have a favorite storage appliance, feel free to use that with your favorite compute. That's a great way to kind of mix and match within the environment, not put all your eggs in one basket, while still giving you that level of simplicity when it comes to the management of each one of these components. Now, when we talk about the cons, we're talking about the complexity when it comes to a multi-vendor ecosystem. Provisioning, management, upgrades, updates, those things are a little bit more time consuming when you don't have a unified platform across the board. The upgrades obviously are a big piece of this. When we talk about making sure that your OS is going to be compatible with any kind of upgrade you're doing on the firmware or anything along those lines. This whole mentality of the complexity when it comes to having a 3-tier architecture really came full force about 10 years ago, Javi.
Yeah, I would say that's about a decade ago that the whole thing that you've been explaining about, pros and cons, got the industry to think about how we enhance the experience of the end user, right? So it's not just purely about the technology, the cores and memory and the terabytes of spinning disk or SSDs or NVMe. It's not just about that. That actually the problem that I know you're going to set up and like what HCI tackled was about the end user experience, about managing and trying to consolidate all those siloed stacks that we had in the past into this hyper-converged solution that you're going to talk about.
Hyper-converged. Why did customers love it? The compute was inexpensive back in the day. That was a more of a commodity type hardware. So hyper-converged is a platform that basically combines that 3-tier architecture into a single appliance, allowing for very simplistic management. What that means is if you do need to upgrade any compute or capacity, you know how to budget for that because you're kind of have to get an additional node or an additional clients to basically make up for those needs. This made it easy to manage, right? Simplified operation by combining the entire stack into a single management, in which case gives you the capability of doing pre-check upgrades for the entire stack versus worrying about is the OS going to work with the firmware and everything along those lines. That goes with everything from your compute to your storage to your networking. And then lastly, the single vendor. So a single vendor platform is also great when it comes to the ease of support. when we talk about, hey, I'm not sure why this storage appliance is acting like it is. Maybe your compute vendor says, oh, it is actually the storage, or the storage says it's the compute, or hey, maybe it's a networking issue. If there's multiple vendors, you're going to get a lot of pointing fingers and kind of not understanding where the actual issue lies. That's where Hyperconverged really came in and said, hey, no matter what your issue is, call us. No matter if it's Nutanix, if it's Dell, there's a lot of different HCI platforms out there that give you kind of that one throat to choke when it comes to the support. Now, talking about the cons, obviously, when we talk about the idea of having to scale both compute and storage at the same time, you really are limiting yourself on what you actually need. Maybe you have a very compute extensive environment, in which case you don't necessarily need to add capacity. But in the HCI type world, you would have to add both. It lacks the flexibility to scale resources, as I just mentioned, and you can't necessarily handle dynamic or specialized workloads. So in today's world, we know there's a lot of different workloads coming out, be it containers, be it any kind of microservices. Most hyper-converged infrastructures aren't going to be able to accommodate those types of workloads, which makes it a little bit of a con, specifically in today's day and age. Off-balance resource utilization. That goes back to the scaling. Maybe you have a large abundance of capacity that you need, but ultimately with that comes a lot more compute. A lot of the times we see our customers in hyper-converged infrastructure and only really utilizing the resources on one side or the other. And then lastly, just single vendor lock-in. I know I said this was a pro previously, but a lot of customers are a little bit more nervous about putting all their eggs into one basket. Obviously, the support idea of this is nice, but if you have a vendor for the entire stack, that may get a little bit hairy. So now in today's age, where a lot of vendors are going is ultimately called a disaggregated type environment. This is kind of giving you that same mentality when we talk about hyper-converged, while giving you the flexibility of the 3-tier type architecture. Disaggregated, why? We can scale separately. We're not locked into a single hypervisor, which is going to be the key here. It's going to be easier management with things like shared storage, be it vSAN or be it any kind of other shared storage that is out there. Maximizing the resources you have on site, giving you a little bit more management across the board and automation, while still allowing you to kind of pick the underlying technology. So the pros of this, it allows you to be more workload oriented versus hypervisor and vendor focused. So what that means is if you do have a mixed environment of, say, containers and VMs, you're going to be able to basically pick the software needed for specific workloads versus throwing a blanket hypervisor or a blanket vendor on top of the environment. I know this seems a little counterintuitive because then it's just a mix of management, but with the new disaggregated solutions that are coming out, it's going to give you a little bit more management and automation, and it's going to act a little bit more as an IaaS or a PaaS type environment. You guys tell us what kind of workloads you have, and then ultimately let us worry about the actual hardware, the technology that's on the back end to accommodate that specific workload. And then lastly, this supports traditional and modern workloads, as I just mentioned. And it's so obviously the automation is dependent upon the storage platform. So if you have a storage appliance in your environment that maybe won't give you the capability of doing things like shared storage, you're really going to lose out on some of the features and functionalities that you get with a disaggregated system. And then secondly, the con would be early adoption. A lot of our customers have been on the same hardware for quite some time or used to a certain hypervisor, maybe not evaluating other things other than VMs or the hypervisor that they're using. Early adoption scared some folks. The good news is that in today's world, this is a lot more about the software layered on top of the hardware. The underlying hardware is obviously important due to some of the features and functionalities that you're going to get with a certain storage appliance over one or the other. But when it comes to the software that's layered on in the disaggregated type environment, giving you that automation, it's going to be less important from the actual hardware they tap on the back. You should layer, Hobby.
Sure. Just a quick call. And I think that what we've seen is the evolutions where the decisions come from the hardware going all the way out to the stack of the application. 3-2-1 was all about which vendor you have to storage. You're going to be fiber channel, you're going to be iSCSI, you're going to have Microsoft, VMware, Nutanix, Red Hat. So you start from the ground up going into the solution. CI is kind of in the middle of those. You break it a little bit and try to see, it's not just about the hardware because HCI brings it all together. But now with disaggregated, you see that the shift from the decision is going to be from the application down. The most important thing is always, and always has been actually the application, the software you're running, the problem you're trying to solve. Not having to think about the vendor, the protocol, the cabling, and all of that good stuff that comes underneath, because the disaggregated vision gives you that ease of use and not that lock in. Hey, that server today is going to be a VMware server. Tomorrow probably is going to be a Red Hat. It's going to be easy to switch. You can move workloads around. You can move VMs around, containers at the same time, modern and traditional. So I think that's kind of the key to make the difference between the disaggregated, which sounds and smells like a little bit like a 3-tier for a lot of people. I've been doing this for a long time, the same as you. But actually, that's one of the key differences. It's about the application finally gets its number one spot in the decision of the underlying infrastructure. And I think that's one of the key issues, one of the key things and differences that we can see in the future coming with disaggregated platforms.
Yeah, and I'll just leave it there. Obviously, disaggregate is brand new. There's going to be a lot of products and solutions coming about around disaggregated. So if I were you, I would definitely go check out some of those and start poking and prodding around kind of what is coming next, because these are the conversations we're having with every single one of our customers. So moving on to a little bit more of an update. So as we all know, VMware was previously owned primarily by Dell. That relationship was removed about 2 or 2.5 years ago when Broadcom purchased VMware. This means a lot of different things. Most of the conversations we're having with customers is around, hey, where do we go from here? We know we've seen the renewal costs. We've seen kind of where we are today. We see the features and functionalities that we're utilizing. Is VMware the right fit, or is it time to look at other hypervisors? There's no good answer for which direction you guys should go. That's going to be a business decision. And we're here to kind of help work you through that journey and allow you to make an educated guess by some of the facts that are going on with VMware, then what other opportunities are out there. So just a quick VMware update. Previously, VMware was very a la carte when it came to licensing. So if you wanted certain features or functionalities, that was additional SKUs that you had to purchase. Another big difference from now and then was the fact that the Broadcom and VMware are now doing subscription-based licensing. So instead of the previous perpetual-based, which typically a lot of our customers purchase this on the actual hardware that they were procuring, this is now coming, and most of the time has to come directly from VMware in a subscription-based model. That means that you are paying at a monthly or annual or all upfront type model, in which case you need to be aware of the scenarios that you're in right now versus where you need to go if you need to get security updates, if you want to be under support with VMware. There's a lot of different changes, which are a lot of the conversations we're having. So all that to say is previously there were a few different flavors of vSphere and vCenter, which are the two main VMware type products. In which case now they've bundled them into 4 different solutions. So the first of which is going to be vSphere Standard. This comparable would be Standard or Essentials if you're familiar with those perpetual based licenses. Really the only thing you're going to get with the standard licensing are going to be vSphere Standard and vCenter. There's no additional add-on options, which I'll talk about in the later packages. vSphere Enterprise Plus is kind of the next step up. It's going to be very similar to Standard. The only difference is the fact that you're going to get vSphere Enterprise versus vSphere Standard. In which case, the comparable here would be more like the Enterprise Plus type model. And then lastly, again, with Enterprise Plus, just like Standard, you have no add-ons that you are capable of adding. So then we move into kind of the bigger bundles. These are for customers that are a little bit more ingrained in some of the upper level softwares that VMware has to offer. So the first of which is going to be vSphere Foundations. You're going to get 100 gigabytes of vSAN Enterprise per core. So if you buy 96, you get 960 core or gigabytes of the vSAN. This is instrumental for customers that are using hyperconverged or using vSAN in their environment today. And then lastly is going to be the ARIA suite. The ARIA suite is going to be things like vRealize and kind of those upper level automation type features and functionalities that a lot of our customers are utilizing. So that's what you're going to get with the bundle. Then we talk about the add-ons. So when you're in the TDF for the vSphere Foundations, you're going to have the capability of adding on additional vSAN if your environment is bigger than that per core allocation that you're going to get with the actual licenses. You have the capability of doing cloud DR, ransomware recovery, old school SRM, now labeled LRM, Tanzu Intelligence, which is kind of the upper level Tanzu features that you're going to get, mission control, and app platform. So again, if you're heavily involved in the Tanzu type environment, this would be a good fit for you guys. Then lastly, you're going to have vSphere Cloud Foundations, or what they call VCF. This is going to be a newer bundle that ultimately VMware is pushing a lot of their customers into because of all the rich features that you're going to get out of the box, quote unquote. So there's no real comparable. This is kind of all-encompassing licenses. So you're going to get the vSphere Enterprise Plus, you're going to get the vCenter, you're going to get the Tanzu. In the vSAN world, you're going to get 100 TB versus the 100 GB that you get in VBF. And that's per core. You're going to get the ARIA Suite Enterprise. You can use NSX for VCF, HDX, ARIA Ops, SDDC, and Select Support. And then some additional add-ons, just like the VBF. The only difference is you're going to have the capability of doing more on the networking side of the house. So AVI load balancer, you're going to be able to do the firewall with ATP, and then all those Tanzu intelligences that you're going to get with the VBF or have the capability of purchasing alongside VBF or VCF. Some general notes here around how they're licensing this and selling this is you have to have a minimum of 16 cores per CPU. That is pretty standard for most customers. We don't typically run into issues there. The bigger piece is ultimately the minimum 72 cores per purchase. So if you are a smaller shop with only maybe 2 servers and they're 32 cores each, you may be in good shape. But if you have single proc servers with 16 cores each, no matter if you only have 32 cores in the environment, you're going to have to go ahead and purchase those 72 cores. So all that to say is, dependent upon the actual environment that you're in, it's going to need to be determined which bundle you guys fall in. A lot of this is going to come down to the technicalities of the solution versus the actual financial side of the house. But it's all just to say, make sure you're evaluating the licenses and the renewal quotes that you're getting and understanding properly what you actually need to utilize before you go out and buy the big VCF bundle. And then lastly, just vSphere versus enterprise versus standard. The enterprise just includes some additional things like distributed switch, DRS, DPM, and proactive HA. So a little bit more security, a little bit more redundancy in the environment. That's really where the enterprise standard or enterprise versus standard vSphere licensing comes into play. Javier, anything to mention here?
Sure. I think it's a lot to take in. I think it's been better. The past year has been very, there's a lot of noise in the industry with all the changes that have come with the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom. I think it's already settled a little bit. So we're, looking at customers probably after the waiting period that they had to try to see where those buckets they fill. But that's the mission that we have here. The team that we have over here that supports Cody in terms of solutions. This is our bread and butter. We go talk to customers, we support them to try to see where they fit in their VMware journey. If they're going to stick with VMware, that's great. We have new versions coming later down the year. So it's our job to try to map these versions and these bundles within the need and the solution that they need to build for their future endeavors. Sometimes it's cost-based, sometimes it's feature-based. If you go to VCF Cloud Stack, it's all in, right? That's like the fully loaded car you get at the end of the day, all the bells and whistles. Sometimes you can sit in between. Sometimes you don't see or don't have a path to the budget for that one. So that's kind of like a call out that I would like to make here for the role that we play at Weaver is try to support customers to see where they fit in all these options that we have that Cody has already explained.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So now that we've talked about the VMware updates, let's talk about what we consider the big three hypervisors. These are kind of the front runners when it comes to these decisions being made on which hypervisor is the right one for me. So in the next three slides, we're going to go over the top three in our minds and kind of give an example of why this would fit for your environment, what makes the most sense, why you would choose a certain hypervisor, one or the other. Javier, before I jump into the big three, would you mind just doing your ramble of how many other hypervisors are coming up?
Well, the world of hypervisors is an ever changing one. It's usual when it comes to IT. When you think about hypervisors, comes to mind, of course, you're going to have VMware, you're going to have Microsoft Hyper-V, and you're going to have Red Hat, Enterprise Virtualization or REV. Also, we have Nutanix as well as part of the HCI play, with their version of hypervisor. But there are small, startups and companies that are coming, after this whole tumult that we had last year with VMware. One of them is Proxmox, for example. Some of them are quite ready for prime time. Some other like kind of struggling in terms of becoming an enterprise solution. But I think in terms of what we've seen in the industry, the big three are still going to be, Nutanix, Red Hat, VMware, Microsoft, just to add a like 3+1 probably over there. There's kind of a struggle with that for that third spot. Of course, VMware is the big honcho still. Microsoft with the sheer size of the investment that they had and the play they're making for getting all their nice Azure cloud capabilities on-prem and thinking about the hypervisor as an extension, a natural extension of the cloud experience. I think that's kind of the key that customers are seeing. Because if you saw on the past slide with VCF, it's even in the names. It's VMware Cloud Foundation, and at the end of the day, again, it's all about the experience and how you manage and how you service your internal customers with those applications or workloads and VMs and containers, right? And the cloud operational model is great. That's why people love the public cloud. They don't like the price, but they love the operational model of having things moving them around from one side to the other. So that's kind of like the things that we're going to see in terms of the big three or the big four, arguably, depending on who you talk to in terms of the hypervisors that are coming out for the market.
Absolutely. So jumping right into it, we're going to start with VMware. So why do customers choose VMware? A lot of the customers that we're talking with that are heavily ingrained in the VMware, they typically like to stay in that environment. They're used to it. They know how to manage it. They're not afraid of it. There's nothing new to learn. VMware is still a great choice. VMware is the market leader. They set the standard, to be completely honest. For most customers, there's little to no knowledge transfer and ultimately the easy use. When it comes to being heavily ingrained in it, as we mentioned on the previous slide, we talked about vCenter and vSphere being kind of the big two that most of our customers are utilizing. If you are in the SRM world or the vRealize world, the DRS, vMotion, these are things that are kind of layered on top of what you're getting with the standard vSphere and vCenter licensing that are a little bit more difficult to move away from than just simply changing your hypervisor. So definitely something to think about. Another reason customers choose VMware is because they are a large enterprise type account. Unfortunately, the way Broadcom is going is catering to those larger customers because of the fact that that's where the money is. This is a great product still for a lot of customers, and it's obviously a great fit for a lot of our customers. Some of the options when we talk about VMware are what's going to be HCI. Primarily when we're talking about HCI with VMware, we're talking about the Dell VxRail. This is a product that Javier and I sold a ton back in the day, and it is a fantastic product. With this new change of VMware, is our a little bit more locked into the VMware type scenario, which maybe some customers aren't necessarily too ecstatic to be a part of. There is a dynamic nodes option when it comes to the HCI platform that Dell offers. The one difference because in the VxRail are going to be the capability of purchasing the storage separate from the actual stack, which means you're going to lose out on some of the vSAN capabilities, but you're also going to be able to cut down on some costs, being that you don't have to purchase those additional licenses that I showed you on the previous screen for the vSAN side of the house. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility on the storage side while maintaining that ease of use and simplicity when it comes to the management side. There's Power Flex. That's going to give you the capability of doing an HCI type environment, maybe utilizing a separate hypervisor, something along those lines, or mixing environments when it comes to the hypervisors you're using, giving you that more workload specific type environment. And then lastly, disaggregated with VMware. That's really going to give you that 3-tier type environment while layering on additional automation and features that are allowing you to pick the actual application that you're looking to run on the hardware and letting the hardware come as more of a drag versus being the reason why you buy something. So again, that disaggregate is just more so about, let's think about workloads versus what the actual hardware is that is running. So that's VMware in a nutshell. I'm going to move on to the next big one. Obviously, we're all familiar with Microsoft. I would say 98% of our customers, if not closer to 100%, are utilizing some sort of Microsoft product. They're tried and true, and they had a great hypervisor, and it's great for certain customers. Why do customers choose Azure or Hyper-V? If you're a Microsoft customer today, you're probably looking at this as an option. Maybe you're even licensed for it in your bundles that you have. The big thing when we talk about Hyper-V and Azure Local is really where Microsoft is going from a hardware on-prem type environment while leveraging the Azure cloud. The Azure Local, they have some nodes out there that give you the capability of moving VMs from your on-prem environment up into the cloud and vice versa. It's going to give you a lot of flexibility when you're determining, hey, where should this application be built? Where should this application run? Is it more cost effective to have it on-prem versus into the cloud? What's that going to cost if we want to move this application from on-prem to the cloud? If you're heavily in leveraging the Azure cloud today, the Azure Local is going to be a great option for you, in our opinion. The one caveat is obviously you have to have that Azure Local or the Azure copy or workloads in the cloud living there today. That's going to be one key focus of the Azure Local. No matter if it's Hyper-V or Azure Local, another reason why a lot of customers are going to this type of environment is because they are mainly Windows-based. As you can imagine, Windows is a Microsoft product. Having that Microsoft hypervisor is going to be key and ultimately help a lot of customers with some integrations and automations and ultimately manage the environment. And then lastly, if you're looking for a cloud secondary site, as I mentioned before, it gives you the capability of seamlessly moving things in and out of the cloud. And if you have the requirement of having a cloud copy and want ease of use beyond the actual on-prem or even in the cloud, this is going to be a great solution for you. So the options that we have here are going to be Azure Local. Again, as I mentioned, those are the Azure Local on-prem nodes that give you the capability of scaling to the cloud in and out. We have the Power Flex with Dell that I previously mentioned. That's going to give you the capability of layering Hyper-V onto their hardware to make it a seamless, more not hybrid converged completely, but a lot more automation and management ease of use when it comes to that platform. And then lastly, again, disaggregated. I know we're kind of hitting this one home, but in the future, disaggregated is definitely going to be a good option for customers that maybe want a little VMware. They want a little Hyper-V on the workloads. They want some Azure cloud. This is going to be a great option that customers will utilize when it comes to need a little bit more flexibility in their environment. Javier, anything to mention on the Microsoft side?
Sure. Yeah, I think that a great call out here, and this is going to be more on the budget side. If you have software assurance contracts with Microsoft and you have Microsoft, Windows servers 2022, 2025, you get, enterprise level licensing, you get unlimited VMs. So one of the differences that one of the things that Microsoft likes to talk about when in competitive situations with VMware is like, hey, if you have a VMware configuration, you have to license your, enterprise standard, regardless of the version of it. And then again, you need to license the OS VMs, right? You need to add on a Microsoft license on top of that VMware license. So when Microsoft says, no, if you leverage Hyper-V or Azure Local, and if you already have it with software insurance, you get the right to leverage unlimited VMs on the cluster because you're already paying for the underlying hypervisor in the flavor of Hyper-V or Azure Local. So I think for a customer that is large on the Microsoft side, as you mentioned, if most of your VMs are going to be Windows based, that's kind of a no-brainer. But again, the work that we do here in Weaver is to help you get to that conclusion by analyzing your workloads, analyzing what you need to do, where you need to be, and then, of course, providing options and recommendations based on that.
Absolutely agree. And if you do have one of those software assurances with Microsoft, we'd highly suggest reaching out to them, determining if you have Hyper-V, and just test it out. Even if it's not something you want to move forward with or completely move to now, it's definitely a good option because a lot of our customers are already licensed for this hypervisor. And with the unlimited VMs, it definitely is a little bit more cost effective of a solution specifically for those customers that are heavily involved in the Microsoft world. The last one we're going to talk about is Nutanix. Nutanix is becoming very prevalent in the market. They were the first hyperconverged platform. So they were the ones that kind of set the standard of what hyperconverged means and what good looks like when it comes to hyperconverged. Why do customers choose Nutanix? Customers looking into containers. Nutanix is a great play for any customers that are heavily involved in their containers or looking to utilize containers. Again, as I mentioned, Nutanix was the original HCI platform. They were the first to market when it comes to hyperconverged. That means that you're going to have the capability of having the original hyperconverged solution. It was fully baked. It's been in the market for a very long time. It's 100% software. So that gives you kind of a multi-platform type choice. You can theoretically be certified on various server configurations with Nutanix, so that gives you a little bit more flexibility from a underlying hardware type scenario. And then lastly, the Nutanix support is second to that. A lot of our customers stick with Nutanix from the start because of the support that they're able to give you. The great thing about that is no matter what the underlying hardware is, you do have the capability of basically running Nutanix and having the Nutanix at the back end to kind of help out. Being that it's all 100% software, it's going to be a little bit more simple when it comes to the support that you need for that infrastructure. Some of the options here are going to be the Dell XC nodes. These are basically the PowerEdge nodes, built on PowerEdge nodes that are ready to accept the Nutanix licensing and the software that comes with the Nutanix. Again, being 100% software, that's really where the bread and butter is. There's various other platforms out there that you can run Nutanix on, but the XC nodes from Dell are a great option. And then lastly, the PowerFlex. This is going to be a new solution that Dell is coming out with that's going to give you the capability of leveraging Nutanix on the PowerFlex appliance that we talked about in the previous two hypervisors as well. Not sure if it's a scenario, but there is talks that Nutanix is going to come out with their own hypervisor in the near future, in which case may give customers a little bit more flexibility. When we talk about Nutanix today, it is strictly a hyperconverged type infrastructure. So if you're not looking into hyperconverged, maybe Nutanix is necessary right now, but in the future, there's definitely going to be a play that Nutanix will have their own hypervisor. Anything to mention here, Javi?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think Nutanix has built a great street cred with their customers. Their OG HCI platform, as you mentioned, when I was working for Dell for a few years ago, that was the first alliance that we had to provide those XC nodes. Again, purpose-built nodes for that. And I think you have, again, great customer support. The GUI is easy to use. Again, all about the end user experience, easy to manage. You don't need to have levels 300-400 knowledge about things. You just set them up. Automation is great. Cloud integration is great. But again, pros and cons. You have the cost for licensing the storage capacity. One of the things that, with PowerFlex is trying to get around that is licensing that outside, very similar to that dynamic nodes with VxRail. But I think at the end of the day, talking about the big three, every one of them had their place in the market, right? There's not one all-fits-all solution. And that's kind of again, I want to be reiterative about the point. What we like to do here at Weaver is just to help you navigate these waters, provide you with the information, make the case, make the analysis data-driven, and then just, present you with those options.
Then, Javier, if you don't mind, the kind of final piece here is going to be talking about containers as a whole and what containers look like versus virtual machines. Again, when we talk about this new day and age, the idea of a workload-driven conversation is going to be instrumental. So Not all workloads are going to fit into the VM world. Not all workloads are going to fit into the container world. But I think as time progresses, this whole conversation around containers and virtual machines, ultimately gearing towards modern workloads, is going to become more and more prevalent. So one thing we like to talk to our customers about is ultimately virtual machines versus containers. Where do they play? Why do they matter? And ultimately why you should be looking for them. So if you don't mind, Hobby, just give a brief understanding of kind of the differences between the two.
Sure, no worries, Cody. So basically, we want to talk about virtual machines as the traditional, which is kind of funny to me because in IT, calling something as traditional as a VM sounds kind of odd because it was modern till like 2 minutes ago, but now it's traditional. Go figure. And containers is the modern workload. So at the end of the day, the main reason I'm going to start at the bottom here because I think the use case is the most important difference, and that builds the rest of it to the top. So let's start with the use case. When you have VMs, you have a full stack of an operating system on top with application and dependencies that's wrapped around a virtual machine. So the VM was born out of a necessity of trying to be more to rationalize resources, not having a single box server for each one of those applications, right? So a VM, it's virtual machine. It emulates server, a full-fledged server, drivers, Z cards, hard drives, the works. The operating system sees and cannot, distinguish between a VM being a virtual machine or a real server underneath that. So that's kind of the play of the VM. On the other side, the container was built for cloud-based applications. So when you need the elasticity of having a lot of instances of the same process running around microservices, applications that were born out of the cloud era, that's where the containers are shining today because the rapid deployment and the capability of moving those is much faster than the traditional VM. Even though with VMs, you can have bursts and you can spin VMs rapidly, it does not, equal the speed of what a container-based solution can do. But again, I want to start from the bottom up. Portability, the VM is very dependent on the hypervisor. So if it's a VMware machine, it's different from it. But it's an Hyper-V, is a RHEL machine, or it's a Nutanix machine. So there's kind of a silo in terms of the vendors. You can convert and converge, there's tools to that, migration from Hyper-V to VMware, vice versa. But I think at least it's a little bit more silent on that perspective. A container is OS based rather than VM based. So if you have a Linux container, it doesn't matter if you're running it on top of the VMware Tanzu or you're doing it on top of a RHEL like an OpenShift. The container is going to be containers. It could be Docker, it could be different vendors, but at the end of the day, it's more lightweight. So it can just move around different environments. You can move it. And we see this a lot with, DevOps customers that are coding or releasing applications for your phones, your tablets, everything that's web-based. The rapid cycle of having that, multiple versions of the OS and the app running on the same time for testing and production and the whole chain, that kind of gives that containers a little bit of an edge there. The performance, of course, containers, it's faster. You don't have the whole stack of VM, so it's very lightweight. You don't need a lot of resources underneath to run the containers, so that's great. The resource usage, of course, it's kind of all part of that. On the architecture, containers, again, the OS and the kernel, is isolated, or you have user space instances. You don't need the full VM, and that kind of gives them the difference in terms of the architecture. But I think just to wrap it up, and just to be mindful of time, is the use case is going to be defining what's going to be the technology that's going to be needed for that. VMs are not going away. There's no chance of that. Fully fledged operating system VMs with application stats and dependencies will be here for a while. But of course, every new application, most of them, what we see, because of the demand that we see from customers, if it's cloud-based, definitely going to start a container.
Yeah, thank you, Javier. And just to kind of wrap that up, this whole presentation has been around hypervisors and what's going on in the marketplace. I think the key thing to realize is that we used to be so hung up on the underlying hardware and the software that we're utilizing to achieve what we're trying to get to. In today's day and age, things are changing so rapidly, and understanding these processes from a workload type model versus underlying hardware type model is going to be instrumental to your success. We need to focus on, hey, okay, let's create a solution for this application versus let's throw a blanketed solution across all applications. No data is treated the same. No data should be treated the same, in which case, why would we throw the blanket software and solutions on the entire environment versus really figuring out what works best for each individual workload? So this whole idea of data is key. That's always been the case. It's becoming more and more prevalent as things are changing in the marketplace. And it's definitely something to take into consideration as you move forward. What does the next 5 years look like? So just a couple call to actions here is review your current environment. Weaver has the capability of running what we call live optics. It's a scan of the environment, non-intrusive, and it allows you to basically look at the environment holistically. We understand what kind of IOPS you have, what kind of compute you have, what the underlying hardware is, what the capacity looks like. How are these environments running? At that point, that's what Javier and I kind of jump in and we discuss, okay, this is where you are today. Where do you want to be? Let's not focus on the actual products on the back end. Let's focus on a solution that makes sense for you. Test out other hypervisors. Every hypervisor that we talk about, all the ones that are coming up, they have the capability of getting you a couple licenses to try them out. You may be very comfortable in your solution today. You may have a couple more years on the hypervisor that you're utilizing. But because of the way the world is moving and how quickly things are changing, as I mentioned, it's always good to start POCing or proof of concepting some of these other hypervisors to see if something were to go awry with the current environment, or maybe financially you can't make that jump to the renewal. This gives you at least some background understanding of what else is out there, and ultimately you have hands-on experience with it at that point. And then lastly, test out containers. These are pretty lightweight. You can get a lot of licenses for free for these just to kind of test things out. Maybe the DevOps team is struggling with the way that VMs need to be spun up and shut down and moved and all these kind of things. When we're talking about microservices, specifically in DevOps, the capability of being able to spin things up quickly, get them deployed quickly, test them out, and ultimately getting them into production is going to be key. We know time is money, and being able to kind of speed up that process with containers or maybe even everything outside of DevOps is definitely something to take a look at. We know that a lot of our customers or all of our customers are very familiar with virtual machines. Containers have been out for a while now, and they're only getting better. And because of this whole workload conversation, evaluating all options out there is going to be pivotal to your success in the next 5-10 years. So that's all we have. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. The contact information is below. Javier and I are always ready to jump on the call. But thanks for listening, and we will, I'm sure, see you guys soon. Thank you.